Hi. All right, for this story, it's from the chapter My Hazy and Humble Origins. In this chapter, it is May's 21st birthday. So that means Kali is 23 and Abel is 25 and Cain is 27. Okay. I blinked again as Kali and Cain brought me back to the present day by telling, for our much younger siblings, the story of when May was born 21 years ago. Kali recounted the story. When she first started crying in my lap, I thought, uh-oh, that's not good. Come on, May. We girls gotta stick together. We're the first pair of sisters. I was really getting worried that she didn't like me. The two of them laughed and shared a high five. May laughed. I love you now, Kali, and I couldn't imagine life without such an amazing big sister. Kali continued, but back then I didn't think you liked me, girl. You definitely weren't as happy with me as you were when Cain or Abel held you. Cain shrugged. Well, May seemed happiest when Abel held her. They've just always been close. May might have been quiet when I held her, since I had practiced holding two other baby siblings. He playfully nudged Kali and winked over at me. But when Abel held her, she would smile or maybe even laugh. May patted my arm and leaned her head against my shoulder. And to this day, no one can make me smile or laugh the way Abel does. I reciprocated her affection, then nodded over to my big brother. The biggest difference is that today, not even Cain can make you be quiet. Everyone laughed. At first, Cain rolled his eyes. But he couldn't help himself from throwing his head back and laughing along with the others. The joke was more directed toward May's loud personality than Cain's way with kids. Once we were quiet again, Cain continued, but even Abel wasn't always good at making his little siblings laugh or keeping them quiet. When he first held Kali, she didn't seem as happy. She even spit up on him. It was kind of funny looking back on it. At the time, I was glad she didn't spit up on me, even though she's gotten worse things on me since then. But I still love her. Our younger brother, Bard, one of the 15-year-old twins, asked, So, Cain, you and Abel have held all of us when we were babies, right? Yes, I did. Cain smiled and nodded. I smiled and nodded in agreement. Bard continued his question. But Cain would also be the only one here who wasn't held as a baby by anyone else who is here right now. Cain nodded again. You're right, Bard. I've held everyone else here when they were babies, but I myself as a baby wasn't held by anyone here. Bard nodded. Interesting. Do you remember at all what it was like to be an only child? None of us can imagine that. Cain seemed to think for a moment. But then he shook his head. No, I must have been too young to remember that. Or nothing exciting really happened back then. My earliest memory is probably when I first met and held my newborn baby brother Abel. May perked up. We hear Cain's birth story and name story every year, but our parents rarely talk about when Abel was born, or even how they thought of his name. Tell us what you remember about when Abel was born. That is, if you can remember any of it, Cain. Well, Cain began. I was about 2.5 years old, and it was the later part of winter, before Dad was going to start taking me into the field with him to watch him start the planting season. Dad told me to go to sleep in what is now the kids' quarters. Back then, I think my only roommates were the cats to keep snakes away. But I couldn't really sleep because Mom kept crying and screaming throughout the night. Every time I got up and tried to wander into their room, Dad would send me back to bed. I was getting scared, like, what's wrong with Mom? Is she sick? Is she dying? But Dad would just send me back to bed, saying, I'll tell you when you're older. Somehow I found sleep during that night. Cat and Kitty heard and kept me company, and so did any of their kittens around at the time. A few siblings said, "Aw," with a few chuckles. Cain might often put out a tough exterior, but we all know that our big brother is afraid of snakes and has a soft spot for cats, which have a therapeutic effect on him.